I have a bit of a riddle for you today. What do the CIA's intelligence failure before 9/11, a deadly disaster on Mount Everest, and the fact that we didn't put wheels on suitcases for 50 years all have in common?
It sounds like the setup for a very strange joke, doesn't it?
It really
But
does.
the answer isn't funny at all. It's
Yeah.
actually a specific psychological trap. It's the reason why groups of incredibly smart, highly educated people often make absolutely catastrophic decisions.
Right, because we tend to assume that if you put the five smartest people in a room, the ones with the highest IQs, the best degrees, you'll automatically get the best answer.
Yeah, that's the standard assumption.
But today's deep dive suggests that is often mathematically false. We are digging into the source material from Rebel Ideas, The Power of Diverse Thinking by Matthew Syed. And before you tune out thinking this is some corporate HR lecture on diversity quotas, just pause for a second.
Right. We really need to be very clear about definitions here. Syed isn't talking about demographic diversity,
Yeah.
what you look like, or checking boxes for a brochure.
Mm.
He's talking about cognitive diversity. It's a measure of how differently a group actually thinks. It's not about fairness or being nice. It's literally about survival.
The premise is basically that surrounding yourself with people who think exactly like you doesn't just make you comfortable, it makes you, well, stupid, or, as Syed puts it, collectively blind.
And the stakes couldn't be higher here. I mean, we aren't talking about bad marketing campaigns. We're talking about national security and life or death scenarios.
So let's start with probably the most devastating example of this collective blindness. We have to go back to August 2001, the CIA.
Yeah, this is the textbook case.
So the facts laid out in the book are these. In August 2001, a man named Habib Zacharias Moussaoui enrolls in a flight school in Minnesota, and he is waving more red flags than a semaphore operator.
Oh, absolutely.
He pays in cash-like huge sums, he's behaving erratically, and probably most terrifyingly, he asks to learn how to steer a 747 in midair, but specifically says he has no interest in learning how to take off or land.
I mean, in hindsight, that is barely even a code. It's just a statement of intent.
Exactly. The flight instructors are terrified. They call the FBI. They literally say, this guy is a hijacker. So the intelligence community has this guy in their sights a full month before the attacks.
And nothing happens.
Nothing happens. They don't connect the dots. The question Syed asks is why? Were the analysts just stupid?
Not at all. They were likely some of the smartest people in the Western Hemisphere at the time. But intelligence isn't the same as perspective. Syed argues the CIA suffered from severe homogeneity.
Which is just a fancy way of saying sameness.
Right. But look at the specific profile of a CIA analyst in 2001.
Yeah.
They were predominantly white, male, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. They came from a very narrow slice of upper-middle-class America.
Yeah.
They went to the exact same liberal arts colleges. They read the same books.
So you basically have a room full of people running the exact same operating system.
Precisely. And because they shared the same cultural lens, they had a massive shared blind spot.
Makes sense.
To a secular, college-educated American in 2001, the idea of a man living in a cave in Afghanistan mobilizing a sophisticated aerial assault on New York City didn't just seem unlikely. It seemed cognitively impossible. It just didn't fit their model of how the world worked.
So they looked at the data, Moussaoui, the chatter, the warnings, and filtered it out because it sounded like science fiction to them.
Exactly. Whereas if you had a team that included people from different cultural backgrounds, maybe someone who grew up in the Middle East or someone who understood religious fundamentalism from the inside, that data points to a very different conclusion.
And Syed calls this collective blindness. It's when everyone in the group reinforces each other's assumptions. If I look at you and you look like me and think like me and you aren't worried.
When I stop worrying.
Right.
It's a feedback loop. And Syed contrasts this with Bletchley Park during World War II, the code breakers.
Oh, the Enigma code team.
Oh, yes. The British military realized that their generals couldn't crack the code. So they recruited this motley crew. They had mathematicians, sure, but they also had linguists, crossword puzzle fanatics, and even eccentric chess champions.
Just a bunch of weirdos, basically.
Kind of, yeah. They were socially awkward, they were weird, and they were incredibly diverse in how they processed information.
So the CIA failed because they were clones, and Bletchley succeeded because they were rebels.
That's the core of the argument right there. Cognitive diversity allows you to cover the blind spots.
This idea of clones actually brings us to a lighter example, but one that perfectly illustrates the mechanics of how we hire. Syed tells a story about the English Football Association.
Yeah, this is a great example of what sociologists call homophily.
Break that down for us. Humhuffle.
It literally means love of the same.
Mm,
It's our deep biological tendency to trust and associate with people who remind us of ourselves.
okay.
So the story goes, the English national soccer team is tanking. They are desperate. They form a technical advisory board to fix it, and Syed is invited to join.
And Syed is a table tennis player.
Right, ping pong champion. And they also bring in a tech entrepreneur and a tactical expert from a totally different sport.
Yeah.
And the reaction from the football world was immediate outrage.
They were completely mocked. The press was asking, where are the football men?
Exactly. What does a ping pong player know about soccer? But that's what we call the clone fallacy.
Right.
If you have a board of 10 experts who have spent 30 years inside the football system, they all know the exact same things. Adding an 11th football man adds zero new information. It feels safe, but it's mathematically useless.
Because they are just overlapping circles of knowledge.
Correct. The outsiders worked because they brought in concepts the football man had never even heard of. Things like dietary data, psychological resilience training. They didn't know the traditions, so they could actually question them.
It reminds me of the poll tax disaster Syed mentions.
Oh, the British political blunder.
Yeah.
A group of wealthy, elite politicians designed a tax system that made perfect logical sense on a spreadsheet in Westminster. But because none of them had ever struggled to pay a bill, they completely failed to anticipate that regular people would find it morally repugnant.
And the result was literal riots in the streets.
Because there wasn't a single person in the room to say, hey guys, this is going to make people really angry. That's the danger of homophily. It seals you off from reality.
So we have collective blindness where we miss threats because we all look in the same direction. But there's another dynamic that's even more dangerous because it happens when we do see the threat, but we just don't say anything. We need to talk about Mount Everest.
The 1996 disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a heavy chapter, but it's essential to understanding how hierarchy kills good decision-making.
Right. Most people know the story from the book Into Thin Air, or the movie. Rob Hall, who is this legendary guide, leads a team up the mountain. They have a strict turnaround time, 2 p.m. If you aren't at the summit, you turn back or you die.
Yeah.
But 2 p.m. comes and goes. They keep climbing. A massive storm hits. 8 people die.
And it's often blamed on summit fever, just getting carried away in the moment.
Yeah.
But Syed argues the root cause was actually dominance dynamics.
Which is really just a fancy way of saying fear of the boss.
In a sense. But it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
In our evolutionary history, challenging the alpha or the leader was genuinely dangerous. It could get you kicked out of the tribe.
Wow. Okay.
So when we are in a strict hierarchy, our brains are hardwired to defer. Rob Hall was the dominant figure. He was the expert.
So even if a junior guide or a client checks their watch and sees it's 2:15 p.m., they suppress that information.
Yes. They assume the leader knows something they don't. Or they simply can't muscle up the courage to break the hierarchy. Syed calls it a status-driven communication failure.
That's fascinating.
The team had the collective intelligence to survive. Someone definitely knew it was time to turn back. But the dominance dynamic completely silenced it.
We see this in business meetings every single day, don't we? The CEO pitches a terrible idea and everyone just nods.
And the silence is interpreted as agreement. That's the trap.
So how do we break that? Because it's not enough to just tell people to speak up. If we're biologically wired not to, we need something more. And Syed offers some actual tools here.
He does. The first one is golden silence. If you're the leader, you do not speak first. In fact, you start the meeting with a defined period of silence where everyone just thinks.
Because once the boss says, I think we should do X, the anchoring bias kicks in and everyone just pivots to X.
Exactly. You poison the well if you speak first. The second tool is brainwriting.
I love this one.
Yeah, instead of brainstorming where the loudest extrovert just dominates the room, everyone writes their ideas on a card or a digital board anonymously before the discussion even starts.
It separates the idea from the status of the person who had it. The intern's idea on a Post-it note looks exactly like the VP's.
And that is how you get the best idea to win, rather than the loudest voice or the highest rank. It totally democratizes the input.
Okay, I want to pivot to the fun part now. We've talked a lot about avoiding disaster. Now let's talk about creating something new. We need to talk about the suitcase.
Ah, the mystery of the suitcase. This is one of my favorite anecdotes in the book because it's just so absurd.
It really is. It's 1958. We have put a man on the moon. Well, we're about to. We have split the atom. But if you go to an airport, you see people sweating, dragging these heavy trunks by a leather handle. It wasn't until the 1970s that the wheeled suitcase really became a thing. Why did it take so long?
This is where Syed distinguishes between two types of innovation: incremental innovation and recombinant innovation.
Unpack those for us.
Incremental innovation is making the candle burn a little brighter. It's refinement. Experts are great at this. They know everything about the current product. But the wheeled suitcase required recombinant innovation,
Which is smashing two things together.
right? It required taking a concept from transportation wheels and recombining it with luggage. The problem is, luggage experts had spent their whole lives thinking about leather, stitching, and handles. They didn't think about motion.
In fact, when the inventor, David Dudley Bloom, pitched the idea, the experts hated it.
They mocked it. They literally said, "Who wants to drag a wagon behind them?" They were so deep in their silo, they couldn't see the lateral connection at all.
And Syed points out that this is exactly why outsiders are so often the engines of innovation.
Yes, just look at the stats. A massive percentage of tech founders and patent holders are immigrants. Syed argues this isn't a coincidence. Immigrants are natural outsiders.
How so?
Well, they have to navigate two cultures, two ways of doing things. So they are constantly practicing recombinant thinking.
They don't take the status quo for granted because it's not their status quo.
Exactly. When you aren't trapped by the way things are done around here, you can see the simple solutions that the experts are totally blind to. This applies to digital innovation, too. Think about Waze or Waymo.
Right, combining satellite data with user input?
Exactly, it's recombinant. It's taking data from one field and applying it to another. If you just hired a bunch of traditional map makers, you'd get a much better paper map. You wouldn't get Waze.
So we need diversity to stop 9/11. We need it to invent the suitcase. But here is the paradox. We live in a world that is more diverse than ever. Yet the book argues we're actually becoming more isolated in our thinking.
This is the echo chamber paradox. And honestly, the most surprising part of the book comes from a study at the University of Kansas.
The Bond study.
Yes, because we intuitively think, hey, if I go to a huge university with 30,000 students from all over the world, I will naturally have a super diverse group of friends.
Right, that's the brochure promise. Come here, meet the world.
But the data shows the exact opposite happens. Large, diverse environments actually increase social segregation. It's a phenomenon called fine-grained assorting.
Fine-grained assorting, how exactly does that work?
Think of a small village of 50 people. If you live there, you have to talk to the plumber, even if you absolutely hate his politics, because he's the only plumber. You have to interact with your neighbor because they are right there. You are literally forced to engage with difference.
But on a massive scale.
You have the luxury of choice. You can find the 20 other people who love exactly the same obscure band, vote exactly the same way, and dress exactly like you do. You can curate a social circle that is a perfect mirror.
So the sheer scale of the environment allows us to filter out anyone who challenges us.
Exactly. We retreat into these micro silos. We end up in a tighter echo chamber than the guy living in the small village.
That is counterintuitive and slightly depressing, honestly. It implies that diversity doesn't just work by osmosis. You have to actively work for it.
You do. And that brings us to the story of Derek Black. This is really the redemption arc of the source material, and it drives home how we break these silos.
Derek Black. Now, according to the book, he was essentially American white nationalist royalty.
He was. His dad started Stormfront, which was the biggest hate site on the web. His godfather was David Duke. Derek was raised in a hermetically sealed bubble of extreme ideology. He didn't just believe it. He was being groomed to lead it. He was the future face of white supremacy.
So how did he change? Because the book details that he did change. He renounced all of it. Did someone beat him in a debate? Did he read a graph that proved him wrong?
No. And this is crucial to Syed's point. Facts don't break echo chambers. Relationships do.
Right.
Derek went to a liberal college in Florida. And eventually, he was outed. Students were protesting his presence. He was completely isolated.
But then something unexpected happened.
A Jewish student named Matthew invited him to a Shabbat dinner. Not to yell at him, not to debate his politics, just to have dinner.
That is an incredible act of courage, inviting the guy who ideologically wants you dead to pass the challah bread.
It really was. And Derek went. And he kept going.
Yeah.
Over months of Friday night dinners, just hanging out, listening, and being treated like a human being. The cognitive dissonance just became too loud for him.
Yeah.
He realized the people he was taught to hate didn't match the caricature in his head at all.
The echo chamber shattered because he actually let someone inside the walls.
That's the key. Syed's ultimate message isn't just get more data or hire more diverse people. It's that we have to actively build bridges. We have to seek out the people who confuse us or passionately disagree with us.
Because if we don't, fine-grained sorting will just pull us further and further apart.
Exactly. Diversity isn't a passive state. It's a highly active practice.
So let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground today. The CIA failed because they were too similar. They suffered from collective blindness.
Right.
Everest turned tragic because dominance dynamics made people afraid to speak up to the leader.
Yes.
The suitcase was delayed by 50 years because experts couldn't look sideways and use recombinant innovation.
And finally, we are all at risk of creating our own echo chambers, even in highly diverse places, unless we actively choose to engage with people who are different from us.
We need rebels, not clones. And we need to structure our teams and our lives to let those rebel ideas actually surface.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. But we do want to leave you with a challenge inspired by the Derek Black story.
We talked about how comfortable it is to agree. It feels good. But if interpersonal connection is the only thing that actually breaks an echo chamber, ask yourself this. Who is the one person in your life you disagree with most?
And not an internet troll. A real person, a colleague, a cousin, a neighbor.
Who is the person you should stop debating and start having dinner with?
That's where the real rebel idea starts.
Thanks for listening. Go find a rebel idea today.